This is the Oppo Reno7 5G, also known as the Oppo Find X5 Lite, depending on the market. There's also a Chinese version of the Reno7 5G to keep in mind, with different specs. To keep things simple, here we'll just refer to it as the Reno7 5G. So how competitive is the phone overall? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our full review. The Oppo Reno7 5G is a mid-tier mid-ranger, and it isn't much of an overhaul compared to the previous model. There are a handful of tweaks here and there, like a headphone jack, expandable storage, and a slightly larger battery. The phone's back panel is plastic and has an eye-catching laser-etched gradient finish that sparkles in the light. While the Reno6 5G had a metal frame, this one is made of glossy plastic. Overall, the phone is pretty lightweight and easy to wield. There's no ingress protection here, even though there are competitors that offer it at this price. The display of the phone is quite like last year's Reno6 5G, a 6.43-inch AMOLED with a 1080p resolution, Gorilla Glass 5 protection, and a 90Hz refresh rate. The high refresh rate makes swiping and scrolling a smoother experience, and it will dial down to 60Hz when you're not touching it to save energy. Not much has changed with the screen since last year, except that now you get HDR10+ support. Regardless, the quality here is good, with deep AMOLED blacks and plenty of sharpness. Colors can be decently accurate if you play with them in settings. And we achieved 450 nits of max brightness with the manual brightness slider, which can boost to 630 nits in auto mode when out in the sun. There's a fingerprint reader sitting under the display too, for unlocking and authentication. It's quite fast and accurate. Like I mentioned before, for your audio, Oppo has brought back a traditional headphone jack this time around. There's still just a single speaker though, which earned a mark of average on our loudness test. Still, the sound quality does seem to be a bit better than last year, with clearer highs and vocals. Another upgrade you get on the Reno7 5G is expandable storage, on top of the 256 gigs built in. The interface of the phone is Oppo's ColorOS 12 based on Android 11. It's pretty straightforward and familiar if you've used a recent Oppo or Realme phone. There are plenty of features provided by Google, like your standard leftmost newsfeed/search. But on top of that, there are a bunch of options and settings you can use to customize the look and feel of the interface. And one ColorOS feature that's really useful if you like using the phone with one hand is the icon pull down. A little swipe will bring all of your icons down within a thumb's reach. Powering all of these features is the same chipset you'd find on last year's model, a Mediatek Dimensity 900 5G. It's not flagship grade, but it's solid. And in benchmarks, the Reno7 5G outperforms popular mid-range rivals like the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. Overall, it's more than enough to provide a smooth user experience, and even games run pretty well. On top of that, the phone packs an advanced passive cooling system, and the thermal management is great. In our stress test, the phone didn't overheat, and performance remained stable. When it comes to battery, the Reno7 5G has a larger 4500 mAh capacity compared to last year, and seems to be better optimized too. It was able to score an endurance rating of 123 hours in our proprietary tests. You get the same 65-watt charging as the Reno6 5G, but maybe because of the bigger battery, it's a little slower here. We were able to charge the Reno7 5G from 0 to 90% in half an hour. Now we have the cameras. There's a 64-megapixel main cam, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide, and a 2-megapixel macro camera, just like last year's model and many other current mid-rangers. 16-megapixel photos from the main cam come out great for the class. There is a lot of resolved detail, low noise, true-to-life colors, and excellent dynamic range. Our main issue is that if you look closely, some details can look like a painting, such as people or cars in the background. Portraits have a ton of detail, and the colors and dynamic range look good. The subject separation can get thrown off from time to time though. 8-megapixel photos from the ultra-wide camera are likable, and actually among the better ones we've seen from these sorts of mid-range phones. There's enough detail, good-looking colors, and wide dynamic range. Noise is pretty low too. 2-megapixel close-ups from the macro camera are decent. They're sharp enough with saturated colors. There's not a ton of detail to be had at this resolution though. In low light, photos from the main cam look very good, especially for this price range. There's plenty of resolved detail, low noise, saturated colors, good exposure, and satisfying dynamic range. There does seem to be an issue where if you shoot another photo right after the first one, you get an underprocessed, noisy, and soft result. You just need to wait a few moments between each shot for the processing to catch up. The dedicated night mode does a good job at brightening the photos, especially in the skies, and it reveals more detail in the shadows while keeping highlights from blowing out. Colors are popping too. The overall look is a bit unrealistic. Low-light photos taken with the ultra-wide camera are pretty good. They are detailed with preserved colors and low noise. The exposure and look are pretty natural looking. The night mode photos are softer but brighter, with improved dynamic range and color saturation. Selfies come from the 32-megapixel front-facing cam, and they have wide dynamic range and accurate colors. The detail is average and the sharpness isn't great, but the overall result is decent. The main cam can shoot video in up to 4K at 30 FPS, and the quality is great. There is a good amount of resolve detail and sharpness, true-to-life colors, low noise, and wide dynamic range. There is electronic stabilization available for this camera, but only if you switch to 1080p. The ultra-wide maxes out at 1080p anyway. The colors here are a bit desaturated, but there's good enough sharpness, low noise, and excellent dynamic range. So that's the Oppo Reno7 5G, aka Oppo Find X5 Lite. You get pretty much the same features as last year, but with a few improvements here and there, like better battery life and HDR time plus, and the addition of fan favorites like a headphone jack and expandable storage. Sure, the Reno7 5G would have been even more competitive with stereo speakers, ingress protection, or a faster chipset, but still the phone is a solid all-around mid-ranger that's worth recommending. Thanks for watching guys, stay safe and see you on the next one.